presenters that we've always had at this conference has been Linda Rising. And I've known Linda for about, let's not go there. I'd only have to known Linda for a long time from the patterns community, where in my personal view, a lot of the ideas that really gave rise to Agile were sort of incubated and emerged from. And been able to share a lot of ideas with Linda, and it's been a lot of fun. And the one thing I always love about Linda's presentations is she always has some really interesting spin that she puts on an idea. I think probably one of the most famous presentations she's put together was our Agile programmers, the bonobos, which basically talked about the copulation rituals of a certain brand of monkeys. And, it gave some interesting ideas about how to resolve disputes in a software development project. Another presentation I loved was also Linda last year at Agile 2009 really asked the question, is Agile a placebo? So here, in the new presentation I haven't seen before, and it's probably going to be very interesting when you look at this, coffee, tea, or Agile. I'm really interested in what the spin and the message of this one will be. So, without further ado, I present Linda Rising.
So that's good. Let's try this out. Can you hear me in the back? Okay. Very good. Every conference needs at least one weird talk. So this is it. And I will be here tomorrow, but if you don't get a chance to ask that question, you can always send me some email, because I love to talk about weird things, especially those weird things that have to do with Agile development or introducing new ideas or patterns. And before I begin, I hope, maybe not, this is commercial. I'm the editor for a new series in IEEE software. The new series is called Insights. It's basically experience reports or your stories about Agile development or anything else that has to do with software. So I have brought several copies of the latest issue so that you can have a look at what the Insights column looks like, and that I know you are all very insightful people, and you all have good stories to share, so I would like to hear those. So come up and talk to me and pick up a free copy of IEEE software. Let's go back to the industrial age. I love to talk about things that are older than I am. We denigrate industrial age practices. We tend to think that Agile has provided a new way, that we look at the waterfall method as something that's left over from a former age, command and control. And we like to believe that Agile has helped us learn a lot about the best way to work. Agile, we say, has pointed out that software is developed by people. We have a list of practices that we try to implement in our organizations. So this talk suggests that perhaps we need to look at the people on the teams. And what does it mean for the people on the teams to be Agile? So let's go back and look at what caused the Industrial Revolution. Now, it's true, I was not around at the time. This was a long time ago, around 1800, and it started in England. And it was the result of a lot of happy accidents, things that occurred at the same time that brought this giant, and it was a revolution, this change almost overnight. So one of the things that we know happened at this time was, it's just not working. clocks. Let's think about this for a minute. If someone is going to participate in the great industrial revolution, which we know involves getting up at a certain time, showing up for work in a factory, when before people had been living on farms, what did people do before clocks? Before there was a way of saying, I want to get up tomorrow at 7 o'clock, so I will. Well, how did you do that today? Did you just naturally wake up? How did you do it?
Alarm?
You set an alarm on a clock, and it allowed you to wake up at some point and say, all right, now I'm ready to start the day. If we didn't have clocks, what would we do? How did we get along before clocks?
Sunshine.
You went to bed and what?
Woke up with the sun.
You woke up when the sun came up, and people said, oh, the sun is up. It must be time to wake up and do all of those things that we have to do. We woke up with the sun. About how long do you think, just a guess, about how long do you think people normally slept before we could command and control the time of our awaking? What's your guess? Average? 9?
7.
10? 7?
12.
12? 8?
7.
Depends on the time of year. Aha, very good. Depends on the time of year. And even now, if you go to countries that have long, dark winters, and long light summers, and interview people there, they will say that they naturally sleep longer in the winter, and they're awake longer in the summer. I wonder why that is. Even now in an age of clocks, why we're still tied to the sun. I wonder. What do you think? It's the way we've always been. We're tied to certain rhythms because we live on this planet. The sun has always said, wake up. When the sun goes away, we go to sleep. But now with the clock, well, let's take a poll. How many of you sleep on average 10 hours a night, which was the average before clocks? How many of you? 10 hours on average. Anyone? Anyone? Einstein slept 10 hours a night. How about 9? Very good. Well, no wonder you're so smart. How about 8? Very good, very good. I'm impressed. 7? 7 is the average now for most people who sleep by clocks. 7, and it is decreasing. 6, on average, every night. 5. Four. Do I hear 4? Now, see, you're afraid, right? 3. You know what we do now? We think sleep is a waste of time. If only there was some way to get rid of that need for sleep. If we could just completely somehow set a clock that would say, well, you don't need to sleep at all, just keep on going. Wouldn't we be more productive? Wouldn't we be smarter? We'd be able to work all the time. I found this recipe. I thought I would share it with you. Heat beer in a saucepan. Get a separate small pot. Beat a couple of eggs. I think there's a lot of protein here. Add a chunk of butter to the hot beer. Stir in some cool beer and then pour over the eggs. Add a bit of salt and mix all ingredients, whisking well to keep it from curdling. Bon appetit. This is how the average European started the day. On average, Europeans were drinking at the time about 3 liters of beer a day, and that includes children. I wonder why. Why were people drinking so much alcohol? Wouldn't that have gotten in the way of the industrial age? I think so. Why did they choose to drink alcohol?
Cleaner than water.
Yeah, it was absolutely cleaner than water. Those who were drinking water, well, what happened to them? So we're the product, think of that. We're the product of a lot of drunk people. Those were the survivors. The people who were drinking alcohol. It's not that they did an analysis to determine the best choice. They just liked alcohol, and those people survived. So liking alcohol has survival benefits, or did at one time.
Still do.
There's an argument that could be made for the use of alcohol. So what happened? Another serendipitous accident. The appearance on the horizon of ships bearing coffee, tea, chocolate. And that great shift enabled people to move away from drinking alcohol, which wouldn't have been conducive to productivity. Think about that. If someone is drinking 3 liters of alcohol a day, are they going to be able to work in the factory? So now the shift. And it was popular for a number of reasons, not the least of which has already been pointed out, that caffeine, which is the common ingredient in all of these things, and interestingly enough, people realized this before caffeine itself was identified. People knew somehow that whatever it was that they liked about coffee, tea, and chocolate was the same. It gave them the same feeling. Caffeine is soluble in hot water. So now, boiling the water meant water was safe to drink. So not only do we have an alternative for alcohol, but at the same time, we get the benefit of drinking caffeine. And what is that? Wait, you sleep 9 hours a night, Mr. WikiWay. How do you start the day? What's your beverage of choice in the morning?
Water.
Water. I don't know about you, but I'd be thinking about hiring that guy. Because for most of us, the beverage of choice has caffeine in it. How many of you started this morning with a cup of caffeine? Yeah, absolutely. So, had it not been for the serendipitous arrival of a beverage that allowed us not only to avoid drinking alcohol, but also to be, well, more energetic, shall we say, and clocks which allowed us command and control over our schedule, the industrial age would not have happened. Yes, there were other factors. But just for this talk, we're going to focus in on caffeine. Because I think most of us assumed, as I did when I began this research, that it's perfectly safe. You can buy it over the counter. This is the only drug that we sell to children. So let's have a look. What we know is that most people in the world drink it in some form. And depends on the individual, but it takes us a certain amount of time to metabolize that. However, and I did start this talk once upon a time by giving a scary version. So I'm not going to do that today. However, I will tell you that the fetus does not metabolize caffeine. So most babies today are born with a lot of caffeine stored up over time that they couldn't get rid of. Is that a good thing? I'm not sure. It's an interesting drug because not only are we able to ingest it pretty easily, but it's metabolized pretty quickly, and it does something very interesting. It's able to penetrate a little covering that your brain has around it to protect itself. It's called the blood-brain barrier. And it keeps bad things out of your brain. Caffeine, however, is able to pass through that easily. So it can penetrate the blood-brain barrier. So that means every time you drink a cup of caffeine, you're sending it right to your brain. Is that a good thing? We have always thought so. We have always thought this was a harmless drug. We have investigated it. There are lots of studies that show that for most of us, for the amounts that we normally ingest, about 300 milligrams per day is what's been extensively studied. That's 2 to 3 cups. Well, how big is this? So 2 to 3 cups, when the studies were done, might not be 2 or 3 cups now. What do you think?
Probably not.
Probably not. Probably not. So in all the studies, the only effect that could really be found chemically, did I tell you I started out life as a chemist? Couldn't have been a computer scientist, of course, because there really wasn't any at the time. We were carving things on rocks. So I'm interested in chemistry. In fact, not only do I have a degree in chemistry, I have a minor in biochemistry. So I love giant molecules and their effects on the body. So the only measurable effect has been to notice that it blocks the action of another chemical called adenosine, and that essentially winds up keeping us awake. So the feeling was, for all of this research, that, well, just small amounts doesn't really seem to be harmful. And we feel better, and we think we are better when we drink it. We think we're smarter, we think we're more productive. So what we've done with the clock and all the practices from the industrial age is we have become command and control about our own lives. We're fighting natural tendencies that we had to get a certain amount of sleep. We think we know better. We think, well, I'm in charge of my body. I can make the decisions about how much sleep I'll get. And if I have to, I know I can always have some more caffeine. So instead of that normal dose of 300 milligrams that's been pretty thoroughly tested, what we're finding now is that people are awash in caffeine. We drink it all day. I know that you think I'm pretty old. It's okay. It's okay. And you know, when you get older, you find little things. Well, you forget where you left your keys, and where did you park your car in that big parking lot? That's a normal thing for people my age. It's caused by the shrinking of a little part of your brain called the hippocampus. It's basically the home of short-term memory. It's the gateway to all of the thinking and the learning that your brain does. So now that you, and I'm definitely the oldest person in the room, so I think I can say this, you're young. But what we see is that in looking at the size of your hippocampus, you're showing signs of early degeneration because you're not getting enough sleep. I'm worried about that. You shouldn't have those struggles that I have. Normal at my age, and there's absolutely nothing I can do about it. But you, I'm depending upon you to support me when I decide to retire. So these are some myths that because we have these tools, the clock which can wake us up and the caffeine that can keep us going, that we have somehow consciously or unconsciously subscribed to this set of myths. Sleeping and breaks are a waste of time. What do you think about that one? Sleeping, waste of time. Breaks, oh my gosh. Let's take another poll. What's the longest amount of time you've ever sat working on a problem of any kind, in front of a computer or not, thinking about this problem? Not moving, really. Not going to the bathroom, not eating, not drinking, not just working on the problem. What's the longest amount of time that's ever been for you? Anyone? Give us a number.
6.
6 hours? Or 6 days? We need a unit. 6 hours. 6 hours. Anybody longer than 6 hours? Oh no, you're the guy who sleeps 2 hours a night, are you? What is it for you? Half an hour. Oh, I'm looking for something longer than 6. Longer than 6. Anyone longer than 6? Esther. Esther.
I want to sit.
Without moving. Without moving.
Not moving at all?
No moving. No, I'm talking about glued to the chair.
Forget it then.
Yeah.
I walk
I know, you're smarter than that. Sorry. Anyone longer than 6 hours? 6 hours. Didn't even go to the bathroom?
That's why I finally have to move.
That's what you find. And did you tell anybody about that?
No,
You didn't?
no.
Because most of the time, people who do that kind of thing are regarded as heroes. Oh my gosh, what's your name?
Mike,
Mike, oh Mike, you worked for 6 hours on that problem. Wow. He must be really productive, really smart. He really wanted to solve that problem. That's what it's about, is the effort. Don't move. You're not the record, Mike. I'm sorry. As long as I've been doing this talk, I have found 2 people who have a 13-hour stint. So that means they sat in front of a computer, in both cases, working on some problem, feeling that they were so close. If I know I'm going to, and pretty soon, 13 hours had elapsed. So we feel if we just had more time, that's what it's about. It's about putting in the time. It's not very agile, is it? Sitting for 13 hours without taking a break. Esther said, I walk around. There's actually another part of this talk that I'm trying to tease out, which is how do you make the best use of your brain's capabilities to solve problems. So maybe we'll do that one next year. Sleeping, breaks, waste of time. How many of you have ever taken a nap at work? I mean in front of other people. Other people knew you were taking a nap. Esther, very good. Esther's so smart. Look at that. Yeah. I think in most workplaces that would not be accepted behavior. In most workplaces that I know of, there is no nap room. The people I know at most workplaces who take a nap go out into the parking lot and take a little nap in their cars. That way, lots of nods over here. So here are the secret car nappers. Because they don't want others to know. And they don't realize what a powerful tool that is. The best way to solve problems is to put in as much time as possible without stopping. As soon as you get up, well, you've lost it. We talk about flow, the benefits of flow. Oh, it's such a misunderstood concept. That somehow I'm in the flow now. If I get up, I'll lose that. No one takes naps except babies and old people. If you're not doing serious work, you're slacking off. If I see you having a conversation with someone in the hallway and you're talking about your son's baseball game, well, I think that is not productive time. In fact, we heard someone say earlier today, well, I'd like to find out who's the dead wood here. That would be a good way to do it, wouldn't it? We'll just wander around and we'll see who seems to be having useless conversations. That'd be a good way to identify them. We say, you, out of here. Productivity myth. It's a waste of time. If you're not seriously concentrating, you're not adding anything. You're not doing anything. Yeah. So let's look at the data. I love these experiments. One thing we know for sure is that the cognitive scientists who study our behavior are a lot better than we are in our industry about determining whether or not something is true. So Steve mentioned a talk I gave at the Agile conference last year on placebo. I often wonder if the drug companies operated the same way we do. It would be something like this. Hey, I've been trying these blue pills. I'll bet they would help your project. You want to try them? And then if they work for her, well, she could offer them to her friends, and pretty soon we'd all be on the little blue pills. Would we have any proof that those really work? Do you have any proof that Agile really works? Show me the controlled, double-blind studies. Do we have any? Do we have any? No, we don't. But do we have a lot of, yes, brother, I have seen the light. I believe. Do we have any of those?
Yes.
Yes. Is that a bad thing? Basing an important business decision on belief? Is that a bad thing? Could be bad. The only thing that concerns me, and was the message of the placebo talk, is that belief is also the foundation for religion. I'm not sure if that's a good thing. So let's look at the data. What we know is that caffeine, at least in those low 300 milligram max doses, yes, it does seem to improve some things, but those things are called vigilance tasks, where you do the same thing over and over again as you would have done on an assembly line. Is that the kind of stuff you do all day? the same thing. Repetition, tighten that bolt, loosen that screw, add that door, toast that bar, lift that bacon, little drunken. Is that what you do all day? You're creative people. Yes, what you do today may be very different from what you did yesterday. New things happening all the time that change the environment. You have to be adaptable or agile. So how do you know that caffeine is really helping you in the kinds of things that you do? Even for vigilance tasks, it's only good after you've been at it for hours and hours and hours. And when compared with the placebo, which in this case was just taking a break, there is no difference. And the absolute best thing you can do to improve performance is just get a good night's sleep. So there are controlled studies, at least for the caffeine part of your life. And what they say is that benefit is all placebo. You know, I think there have been some studies done to show that most people who do development are introverts. I worked at a company once where we did the Myers-Briggs thing and we were all tested. And after my test was done, the folks in HR who were doing this said, "Linda, look, this is really unusual. You're an ENTJ. And not only that, you're off the scale. We can hardly measure each one of these attributes." So E is for extrovert as opposed to an introvert. And they said, this is really interesting because almost every other developer in the company is an INTJ. They're all introverts. They don't get their energy from people. In fact, I can remember being on a team with 3 other guys and another woman. And the other woman said, you know, wouldn't it be great if we all had lunch on our birthdays? We'll take the person whose birthday it is out for lunch that day. So we did it once. And then the other 3 guys said, we don't want to do that anymore. We'd rather just sit at our desks and work. I said, okay. They were eyes. It wore by the time we got back from lunch. They could hardly get through the rest of the afternoon. They were exhausted. So look at the experiments. For simple tasks, everyone tends to do better when given caffeine, but on complex tasks, that's what we're talking about. On complex tasks, extroverts' performance tended to improve, while introverts tended to get worse. So sending an introvert who hasn't had enough sleep out to buy more caffeine is not a way to improve productivity. It's another myth. NASA is interested in this problem, of course, because they send people into space and they worry about their sleep habits. So they injected spiders with drugs. I thought it would be valuable for us to look at it. So here's a normal spider. This web looks pretty good, pretty symmetrical, pretty complete. This is marijuana. Well, I'm a product of the 60s, and I never inhaled. But I can identify with this spider. You made a good start, really. I mean, look at that. Here's a nice beginning. But you can see that sort of midway, he said, hey man, I'm not into web. He probably found something better. Something better to do. Benzodrine. Now benzodrine's an upper. So this spider was going, hey, let me at it. I can do that web. You give it right to me. You think if somebody who's on a lot of caffeine would be like that? Hey, I can do that web in 20 seconds. Let me at it. Okay, there it is. not so good. Really. Chlorohydrate is a downer. This poor guy, he probably could hardly make it to the edge. Whoa, I don't feel so good. I think I'm taking a nap. Oh, but what's the worst web up there? By far. Caffeine. I mean, what was going on here? There's no structure. There's no sense of symmetry. That's your brain on caffeine. What does NASA recommend? It says, well, we know that caffeine does serve its purpose, that in small dosage it will keep you awake. But it takes about 20 minutes on average for most people to begin to feel the effects, and about an hour to reach the maximum for an average person. We know that, especially for women, it takes a little longer. Pregnant women, even longer. Women on the pill, really, really slow to metabolize caffeine. So the recommendation is that since we know you get benefits from taking a nap, have the cup of caffeine, take a 20-minute-ish nap, and then wake up. By that time, the caffeine will have made its way through your intestines and is into your brain now, is blocking adenosine, and you're ready to be alert and do some work. So that's their recommendation. Their studies show that without the nap, you're not going to get the benefit. And in fact, in the paper I read, and I should have said in the beginning, this is not an academic talk, so I'm not giving references. But if you see any of the studies and you would like to have them, please send me an email and say, Linda, I'd like to see that. I will be happy to send it to you. So the results of this study show that 26-minute nap, you get a performance improvement of 34% and alertness increased by 54%. That's with just a very short nap and no caffeine. So if you were going to take a nap, if you were going to think about offering a suggestion in your workplace, the best time, according to our natural rhythms, is in the afternoon, right after lunch, right between 1 and 3. We all feel that after lunch slump. And what do, most of us? We reach for a big cup of caffeine. It would be better and doesn't interfere with sleep if we just had a very short 20-minute-ish nap. We know there are benefits to sleeping longer. And we know that people who get in the habit of it, because I often hear in response to this suggestion, I can't. I do a lot of traveling, and I used to say, I can't sleep on an airplane. Now, even through turbulence, of course yesterday was an exception, there was a big storm and I couldn't have slept through that. But now all I have to do is sit in an airplane seat, boom, I'm out. Practice. Like anything else, it's a skill. You might have to relearn some habits that we all normally have, and then don't delay that. It will upset your sleep at night, even though you're not sleeping anyway, if that nap time comes too close to your bedtime. So that's a suggestion, a little experiment. You could try it. So in 1985, up till then, of course, we did have lots of caffeine around and lots of different kinds of beverages, even for children. And all of a sudden, a new product appeared on the horizon. It was called Jolt Cola. Anybody remember that? I think a lot of you weren't even born in 1985, right? this way, all the sugar and twice the caffeine. Of course, in the US, that would be all the high fructose corn syrup and twice the caffeine. 72 milligrams, twice what had been in old colas. Everyone got excited about that. Wow, now we can have twice the buzz for the same volume of liquid. And it started a trend that I believe is frightening. Because to market something like this, they had to go through a little bit of a tap dance, and they said, well, this is really not food. This is called an energy drink. And energy drinks in the United States are not regulated by the FDA. They're like vitamins. You're on your own. No one knows exactly what's in it. So for many situations, the amount of caffeine was not advertised. People just knew that they got a little buzz out of drinking Jolt Cola, so it became very popular. And then in 1987, even better, we got more caffeine, and it's in a little tiny can. It's just 8 ounces, just a little tiny can. I was out in my neighbor's yard the other day when he came home from school. He's a little kid. He's about this tall, 10, so cute. I said, hey, where are you going? He said, well, I'm going to go out and skateboard. He said, but first, I have to drink 2 of these. I said, oh my gosh. I was just reading about that stuff. You know how much caffeine is those in? I don't know. He said, but that's skateboarding. Now I can skateboard all afternoon. And I thought, yeah, and into the night. So I said to his mother, do you know that he's drinking? She said, oh yeah. She said, I'm worried about that. They have a lot of sugar. So does he have any trouble sleeping? Oh yeah, we can never get him to go to bed on time. It's the sugar. I said, I don't think so. You know, little kids don't metabolize caffeine as well as adults. It takes them longer. Probably takes him all night to effectively metabolize the caffeine in those 2 cans of Coke. You don't know how much is on there, of course, because it's not labeled. So now he doesn't sleep, and he wakes up in the morning, and he's tired. But he has to go to school. So what does he do? Another can. So what are we doing? What kind of training are we giving our children? That's not an American product, by the way. Lest you point your fingers south. This is from Austria. And European children, I've seen them in the train station buying Red Bull. I always do a little bit of research every time I give the talk to find out what's the maximum we can get these days. So this is a product called Fix. It's a product that comes in a powdered form, so you add it to orange juice or other beverages. And you can get 400 milligrams in 1 teaspoon. So that's the equivalent of 3 to 4 cups of coffee, depending upon how it's brewed. It's very hard to give an average for coffee. That's a lot of caffeine. This is something called turkey jerky. It's caffeinated meat. Oh boy, protein and caffeine. Turkey jerky, write it down. Go to turkeyjerky.com. In every bag, there are 150 milligrams of caffeine. So not only are you building up your muscle, but you're getting ready to run up to the top of the mountain. It's for active sports enthusiasts. I couldn't believe, I can't make this up. word lollipops. 80 milligrams of caffeine, so that's a sort of a weak cup of coffee in every lollipop. And you have this wonderful combination of flavors, maple and bacon. What's not to like? And of course, if you don't want to imbibe any calories, you can simply take your morning shower with Shower Shock. Now, I didn't really give this much thought until I realized that the skin is permeable. It's a good way of administering a lot of drugs. Simply by rubbing it on the skin, you bypass the long trip through the stomach and intestines and go right to the bloodstream. 200 milligrams of caffeine in 5 minutes with your morning shower before you had that cup of caffeine. You see a pattern? So now if you're worried about drinking too much and falling asleep before you've had a chance to drive home, so what you get with the combination of bourbon and Red Bull is a wide-awake drunk. Ready to go. No sloppy falling down and embarrassing yourself. Your eyes are wide open. So what we know about sleep is that it's important for learning. Animals, when they're kept awake, no sleep. After a while, they die, of course. It's a form of torture, keeping someone awake, not letting them sleep at all. But animals in experiments forget what they've been taught. So here are two very famous individuals. The first one never slept, Thomas Edison. He thought sleep was a waste of time. He worked in his laboratory all day and all night. But what we do know about Thomas Edison is that he took a lot of naps. In fact, he took naps all the time, especially when he was stuck on a problem. And when he would take a nap in his lab, he would hold a small set of ball bearings in his hand. And as he would drift off into sleep, he'd hit what's called REM sleep, get deeper and deeper. And his hand would fall and the ball bearings would drop to the floor and crash and wake him up. And then he would say, "I got it." Has that ever happened to you? You worked on something, you really put a lot of time on it, and you just couldn't solve the problem. You couldn't find that last bug. So you said, "I give up. I'm going home." Go to sleep. And you woke up the next morning, and you got in the shower, and there it was. Has that ever happened to you? Yes. Yes. Your unconscious mind is like a room full of very smart people. Absolute best thing you can do is exactly what Edison knew intuitively, is to leave it. Hand it over to those smart people. Go to sleep. Go home, talk to your children, take your dog for a walk. Do a little exercise, take a nap. Bingo! That solution will magically appear. Poincaré was a very famous French mathematician, and he's quoted as saying, "I've got a lot of problems to solve. I think I'll go to bed early tonight." So they knew somehow that sleep was where it happened, that sleep had benefits. It wasn't just a waste of time. It wasn't a tuning out. That something about us keeps on going even at night, even while we're sleeping. Those smart people in that little room that is our unconscious, they never sleep. They will work for you 24/7 if you just hand it over to them. So here was an experiment with two groups of people, Group A and B. They were taught to do something, given a task. And then one group, Group A, took a nap. Group B was kept awake doing something else. And what they noticed was that even though they hadn't practiced the task, that the performance of Group A, the nap group, improved just by taking the nap. After they both went home, had a good night's sleep, they were okay the next day. So Group B was able to catch up a little bit on one task. But how many of you just learn one thing every day? Is that what your day is like? Well, I just have one thing to worry about. That's it. So it doesn't really matter. A nap won't help me. This experiment just shows that the performance is minimally improved. And if I just have a good night's sleep, well, that's all I need. Let's make it a little more complicated. Let's teach a group a task, how to do something. And then we'll give them another task. And the next morning what we find is the two groups had not improved. This is more like it. We learned lots and lots and lots of things over the course of the day. It's not going to help us if you just go home and get a good night's sleep. That's not enough. Third version, two groups taught a task. Both were taught a second task, and Group A took a nap in between learnings, but not Group B. They didn't notice any improvement initially, but the next morning, Group A was better. Maybe we have some kind of cognitive limit. That maybe thinking that we have an infinite capacity to learn new things is wrong. And that what we need to do is pacing, maybe a sort of a cycle or an iteration, little tiny pieces during the day, just like Agile V. I wonder. What we know for sure, we've known for quite a while, is that we do this at night. Every 90 minutes, on average, we go through a little cycle, over and over and over again. Sleep is divided up into little pieces. Starts out awake, and we go through phase 1, followed by a phase 2, 3, and then to something called REM sleep, and then we come back up again. And for those of you who have gotten a little older, you might notice that it's harder for us to stay asleep all night. We wake up more often than we used to. And if you look at the timing of those wakenings, you will see that it's about every 90 minutes when you come up and go back through the lighter sleep stages. And then you go back down again. So what we're learning now is what goes on in each one of those stages and how important it is. And one of the things that we're learning is that some of those stages are essential for memory consolidation. The hippocampus that I mentioned earlier, that's the gateway. That's your short-term memory. That's where, when you first learn about something, information is stored in your hippocampus. But you want it in long-term memory, and that only happens at night. And it only happens in a couple of these phases. Otherwise, it disappears. So memory consolidation happens at night, and for most of us, we'll go through a number of these 90-minute cycles. So when I began to learn about this, I thought, if we do this at night, do we also do it during the day? Do we have cycles during the day? If we do, how long are those cycles? Has anyone investigated that? What could I learn? So this was just by accident, one of the papers I saw at the time. It was published in Harvard Business Review, and it was about someone who was talking about this exact thing. And his conclusion was humans are not designed to be linear, but rather we pulse, to move between expenditure and renewal of energy. When we establish that rhythm, that's when we are productive. So again, I'll be happy to send that to you if you'd like to read it. A lot of people are enamored of flow. They know that it takes an effort to be in the state of flow. We know that we enjoy being in the state of flow. We can get caught up in it. There is no research that I could find that shows that this produces anything except the feeling of productivity, or the feeling of being involved or making progress. And it comes from a surge in a chemical called dopamine that is released in the flow state. So we really like to be there. In fact, it's addictive. Dopamine is what's released when most hard drugs enter our system. I think we should learn a little bit more about flow and its effect before we argue that it's a good thing to sit for 13 hours without moving. That maybe that's not when we are most productive. This is one of my favorite papers. It's the one I cite when I talk about the bonobos, because remember, the bonobos are promiscuous. The bonobos resolve all difficulties with sex. And that's not just sex in the ordinary sense. Here's the story that Franz de Waal tells about bonobos and chimpanzees. He said, we know that chimpanzees like bananas. So do bonobos. So suppose you have a bunch of chimpanzees and you heave a big box of bananas into the middle of those chimpanzees. Well, they start fighting over them. And you know, the chimpanzees, male-dominated, aggressive. Who do you suppose wins the fight over the bananas? It's the alpha male and a few of his buddies. They're going to win the fight. They're going to get the bananas. What about the bonobos? Well, if we had a bunch of bonobos over here and we threw in a box of bananas, the bonobos love bananas. They get all excited too. But the first thing they do is have sex. Males with females. Males with males. Females with females. Young with old. Everyone has sex with everyone. It's promiscuous pairing. And then they share the bananas. Sounds pretty agile to me. So when I saw this paper, I thought, well, Arlo and I are thinking alike here. This is great. Promiscuous pairing. It's the bonobo model. He studied in his teams pair duration. How long should a pair stay together? And what he found was they were most effective or productive when the duration of pairing was, 90 minutes. That's the same cycle length as our sleep rhythm, 90 minutes. I'd be happy to send you that paper if you don't have it. It's great. So one thing we know is we don't cycle. Our model is you're not going to move till you get that problem solved or you find that last bug. And that's really, to my way of thinking, a violation of Brooks' law at the personal level. So let's have a little review here, students. What's Brooks' law? Anybody? Yes?
Adding manpower to a project that's late will make it later.
Who is this guy? Absolutely right. Brooks' law. If you have a project that's in trouble and you add more people, you'll make the project fall even further behind. In fact, if you add enough people, you will bring that project to a screeching halt. I've seen it happen. One particular example, a team grew from 6 to 70 in 2 weeks. Ran for 2 years in that state. Produced nothing. They never recovered. They were all working as hard as they could. They just couldn't get off the ground. Fred Brooks wrote a book called The Mythical Man Month, and it's over 25 years old. We still haven't learned that. Any managers in the room? Have you ever added people to a late? Well, of course you have. And usually it's because your boss is going to ask you, hey, Fred, I hear that project is in trouble. Did you add more people? See? Because his boss is going to ask him, and, or at least it can work that way. So we do that to ourselves. We don't take the lessons that you can get from athletes who train, who say, if I'm getting ready for a marathon or some serious event, you would never train 2 days in a row. You would know the importance of recovery, of taking a break. It's Brooks' law at the personal level. There's a limit to what you can pile on your shoulders if you think you're going to keep on going. So I wondered, is it time to give up command and control? Is it time to realize that the research shows that the best thing you can do is get a good night's sleep and take breaks? That maybe that caffeine is just placebo, and you're really not more effective, and you're certainly not smarter, your decisions are not as good, and you're getting in the way of everything you need to learn. And in the process, you're not doing things that are good for your brains. No brain, no gain. So I'd like to encourage you to experiment. I gave you some ideas for experimenting, taking a nap. Well, here's another possible experiment. Maybe the cycle is 90 minutes, maybe not. Why don't you try? See if looking for how you feel at certain points and every 90 minutes make an effort to take a break and do something different. So how many, any smokers in the room? Come on, this is a good thing now. All right, one smoker. Okay, the smokers have an advantage. And in fact, the first time I gave this talk several years ago, a smoker came up to me and said, I know something now. I understand what's been going on. I just quit smoking. And I find that I cannot sit in front of my computer and keep on working. I just can't do it. I thought I was losing my mind. I thought maybe somehow smoking was improving the way I was doing my work. But now I see that smokers take a break. And they do it regularly. How often do you take a break? 90 minutes. Every 90 minutes without fail. And usually, and especially nowadays, there's a lot of restriction. They have to go outside. What a terrible penalty. Oh my gosh, they get out of a building that's probably has not been well designed or have natural light. They actually expose their rays to the sun. Oh my gosh, what are we talking about here? They have lots of other benefits. In fact, I'm getting ready to give a talk on that. They hang out with other smokers. And usually those are not people on the same team. So they find out what's going on in other parts of the organization. They have wider influence than the rest of us. They pick up a lot of things that we don't know. In fact, usually, if you want to know what's going on, ask a smoker. They're plugged in. So the guy who was a smoker said, I know what I'm going to do now. I'm just going to set a little clock, and every 90 minutes, I'm going to get up, I'm going to walk around. I'm going to go talk to my friends, read the newspaper, do something else. Do something completely different, especially if it's physical. Stand up. I know you don't have time to take a nap, but you could take an unnap. Which is just, don't think about what you have been thinking about. Take a break of some kind. So here's another article I'll be happy to send you if you haven't read it. It's by J.B. Rainsberger, and he talks about how he has done exactly this. He divided his day up into 90-minute cycles. And he did this on his own. I was just a discoverer of this serendipitous publication. He divides his day up into 90-minute cycles, taking a small break in between every one. So this is a paper about how he schedules his day and what that has meant for him. So as you start on your experiment, I hope maybe you could have a look at that paper. And what we might find is that even though we're surrounded by those increasing amounts of caffeine in the energy drinks, that we really don't need those. That's a leftover from the industrial age. Agile is supposed to be about a new way of thinking about teams, about organizations. Well, what about a new way of thinking about the people on the teams? Now, we're still locked into industrial age practices of command and control. Come on, it's as though we never left behind the bosses in the factory who are saying, you will show up at this time, you will put in your time. You're not going to have any flexibility or agility, you're going to do what you're told. That's very industrial age. It's definitely not agile. And of course, what I think we should be doing, we should be exercising. So I was astounded at the last Agile conference. There is a company that is now experimenting with these. This is a treadmill with a desk. And the people are coding. They even do pairing. One person is walking who is doing the typing. The other person who is the pair is standing next to the treadmill looking at what the coder is typing. So it can be done. Now, the pace on the treadmill is very slow. You don't ever get out of breath or get sweaty. You just, it's very slow pace on the treadmill. So again, I'll be happy to send you that paper if you'd like to see it. What was amazing is that the entire talk was given on a treadmill. So he had a little laptop. He was using it to show his slides. And he was talking and answering questions while he was walking on the treadmill. There's some new research out. Shows there's a strong correlation, regardless of your age, regardless of your fitness, regardless of your diet, that correlates your mortality with the amount of time that you sit. We are becoming a nation or a world of sitters. We sit all day, We don't get any sleep. We spend our time drinking caffeine, believing that it makes us smarter, and we don't get enough exercise. Will you try some experiments? Will you try getting a little more sleep? Maybe looking for natural cycles in your day? I know you're not going to run out and buy a treadmill test. I think it's a great invention. I think it would make us better. What I'm asking you to do is throw out the way you have been thinking about what you do every day. I'm trying to tell you that's wrong. I'm trying to tell you there's research that says there is a better way. I'm trying to tell you you need to think about doing your own experiments, thinking what's best for you, not just falling into the trap of, well, everybody says, or everybody on my team thinks that. You need to make your own decisions. You're the only person that has to deal with your brain every day. The Buddhists call this beginner's mind. It takes a lot of courage. We saw a most courageous talk from Johanna today about she had to do some serious reevaluating. I'm asking you to do the same thing for your own lives. See what a difference it would make. Start over. So I'll be happy to send you all of the information, and I want to give you a pointer to an interesting new book. It's on the Pomodoro technique. So this is a software developer who said, yes, I believe this cycle thing. I believe we should be paying attention. And in his book, he outlines how you can go about setting up experiments to determine the length of your cycle, feeling that it might be 90 minutes or might not. Pomodoro comes from the Italian word for tomato, and the book, in some cases anyway, comes with a little timer that you can set to whatever you think your cycle length might be, and experiment. Maybe he thinks it's 20 minutes, JB thinks it might be 90, I don't know. I know that we need to find a better way, and maybe the Pomodoro technique can help. InfoQ.com, if you don't know it, is a wonderful source for information about all kinds of things, including a talk that I gave very similar to this on whether we need to cycle or not. And again, I'll be happy to send you any of those articles if you'd like to read them for yourself. So, I hope it wasn't too weird. Was it okay? For the end of the day, when you're tired and you're thinking, maybe I should have had an extra. Anyway, I don't know whether we have time for questions?
Yes, we do.
We do have time for questions, yes. Any questions? Yes. Oh, I'm sorry, I picked on you, didn't I? Okay.
So the question is that how do you know before actually the Industrial Revolution that the average time of sleep of people was 10 hours? Where did you get this number?
Oh, I don't know. From one of the piles of books that I read. I'd have to go home and actually look up the source for that. But I read. Sorry?
There's been some study on this.
I think a lot of it comes from, there have been people who have looked at what a natural sleep cycle would be. I know there were a group of scientists that lived underground for a long time, just simply to measure how long are we going to sleep when there is no sun. Is there some sort of natural rhythm? And there have been lots of experiments like that, isolating people in a particular environment without any external cues or clocks to see, is there a natural rhythm? And there seems to be. And we wind up, we actually have our cycle is a little bit longer than 24 hours. I think that's what gets us into trouble. It's more like 25, but that we gravitate toward that 10 hours a night. But again, send me some email now. And that's true for any of this. If you want to read any of the other papers, just that I mentioned an experiment, I'll be happy to send those to you. Other questions?
And your email is?
Linda@lindarising.org. Yes?
I think his question was, if the
had clocks, how could move 10 to 10 hours?
No, the experiments have been done today. No, is that a joke? All right, that's funny. Other questions? I'll be here tomorrow. I love to talk about all this weird stuff. Thank you for your time and attention.
Guys, last time Linda was in town, I dropped her at Stanley Park. She did about half of Seawall, and then she walked back to this hotel. Next day, she goes out, and I'm saying, Linda, it's rainy. She says, so what? And
He's trying to say I'm really weird.
forget physical fitness. Look into her eyes. You dare to say that you are the oldest person in the audience?
By
I
far.
don't think so. I wish my children are as young as you. God bless you, Linda. Thank you.
Please come up and get a copy of IEEE software.